Interpretation of The Alchemist. Opening. The call to a dream-chasing adventure. Have you ever wondered if those vague longings, those thoughts that keep you up at night, might actually be calling you to embark on a journey? Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist is a book that does just that. It takes the simple story of a shepherd boy named Santiago and lights a spark in millions of hearts. Since its release in 1988, it's swept the globe, selling over 65 million copies and being translated into 81 languages, even winning over folks like Bill Clinton and Madonna. It's not your typical adventure novel. It's a soul-stirring trip through dreams, destiny, and self-discovery. Today, we're diving deep into this story, exploring how it uses allegory to uncover life's big truths. What makes this book special is how it speaks to everyone. Whether you're a 20-year-old dreamer, a 50-year-old in the thick of life, or an elder with a lifetime of stories, Santiago's journey hits home. It's straightforward yet profound, clear yet thought-provoking. We'll break it down from 3 angles. First, how Santiago's quest for his dream unfolds step by step. Then, the hidden symbols and wisdom tucked inside the pages. And finally, what this journey means for you and me, how it helps us find our own treasure in the real world. This time, we're going further, digging into the little details you might miss, to piece together a fuller picture of what life's all about. Ready? Let's hit the trail with Santiago and see where it takes us. Part 1. From Shepherd to Dreamer, the journey begins. The story kicks off in the fields of Andalusia, Spain. Santiago's just an ordinary shepherd boy, loving the open air, the wind across the plains, and the stars at night. He's got a simple dream, to roam the world and see the places he's read about in books. He's a reader, even if it's just basic storybooks, and those words fill him with a hunger for far-off lands. But fate tosses a pebble into his quiet life. He dreams twice in a row about a treasure hidden near the pyramids in Egypt. A gypsy woman tells him it's a sign from the universe, urging him to go after it. Then he meets Melchizedek, a mysterious old man who calls himself the King of Salem, who trades 6 of Santiago's sheep for a promise and hands him 2 stones, Urim and Thummim, symbols of yes and no, to guide him. Doesn't that feel like a moment from your own life? Ever get hooked on an idea out of nowhere, or have a thought that just won't quit? Could that be fate knocking? Santiago's decision isn't easy. He has to sell his flock, leave behind everything he knows, and step into the unknown. He wavers, even thinks about turning back. The day he sells his sheep, he stands in the market, watching strangers lead away the animals that have been his companions for years, his heart a tangled mess. He recalls his father saying, "It's good to see the world." But deep down, he knows this isn't about his dad's wishes, it's his own longing driving him. Melchizedek's words wake him up. When you really want something, the whole universe conspires to make it happen. That line's the heart of the book, the spark that starts Santiago's adventure. He leaves Spain and lands in Tangier, Africa, only to get robbed blind the minute he arrives, left with nothing. Standing on a foreign street, surrounded by a bustling crowd, he feels loneliness and helplessness for the first time. It's a harsh truth, chasing dreams comes with setbacks. He even wonders if he's lost his mind, betting everything on a dream. But Santiago doesn't give up. He takes a job at a crystal shop, learns Arabic, helps the owner turn a profit, and saves up to keep going. The crystal shop owner's a quirky guy, polishing glasses every day while muttering about his dream to visit Mecca, though he never takes a step toward it. He tells Santiago, "I'm scared that if I chase my dream, I won't have anything left to live for." That stops Santiago cold, making him wonder, are dreams meant to be chased or just held onto as memories? Life at the shop isn't a breeze. He works dawn to dusk, figuring out how to draw in customers and make the crystal gleam in the sunlight. He even suggests setting up a stall outside, and it doubles the business. The owner looks at him, amazed, and says, "You've got a knack for this, kid." But Santiago knows he's not here to sell crystal forever. He saves his money and decides to move on. This part shows us that dreams aren't a straight shot, they take patience and grit to push through. Sound familiar? Ever been knocked down by life and had to choose stay put or keep going? Santiago's story says it's not where you start that matters, but whether you're willing to take that first step. Part 2: Trials in the Desert, the Cost of Growing. Leaving the crystal shop behind, Santiago joins a caravan crossing the Sahara Desert. Here, he meets two key figures, the Englishman and the Alchemist. The Englishman's a scholar, obsessed with alchemy, lugging around heavy books to unlock the secret of turning lead into gold. He's all about the power of knowledge, but he shows its downside to thinking without doing. He tells Santiago he's studied for a decade but hasn't even scratched the surface of alchemy. Everything's in the books, he sighs, but I don't know where to start. Santiago watches him and thinks, what's the point of reading if you don't act? The Alchemist, on the other hand, is a man of action. He knows how to turn lead to gold, sure, but more than that, he knows how to steer Santiago toward his inner treasure. When he first shows up, he's on a white horse, draped in a black robe, his eyes deep as the desert night. He asks Santiago, "Why do you come to the desert?" Santiago says, "To find treasure." The Alchemist smiles and replies, "Then you've got to find yourself first." That throws Santiago for a loop, but as the journey goes on, it starts to click. The desert's where the story peaks, it's Santiago's proving ground. The caravan rolls through tribal wars, danger lurking everywhere. One day, he's sitting on a dune, staring at the swirling sand, when a strange unease hits him. He closes his eyes, and a vision of an enemy attack flashes in his mind. He's not sure what's happening, but he trusts his gut. He races to warn the Oasis leader, though at first, no one buys it. A kid even laughs. What does an outsider know? But the leader sends scouts anyway, and sure enough, they spot the enemy. Santiago saves the Oasis and earns their respect. Later, the Alchemist tells him, "You listened to the heart of the world, everything has a spirit, and it'll guide you." Fear's another big test in the desert. It nearly swallows Santiago whole. He's terrified of failing, of dying. He even dreams of being buried in sand, waking up drenched in sweat. The Alchemist sees his struggle and sets up a little test. He hands Santiago a spoon of oil and tells him to walk the oasis without spilling a drop. First time, Santiago stares at the oil and misses the oasis's palm trees and springs. Second time, he soaks in the sights, and the oil's gone. The Alchemist says, "The trick to life is enjoying the moment without losing sight of your goal." Santiago nods. He's starting to get it. Fear comes from obsessing over what's ahead, but strength lies in living now. The ultimate challenge comes when the Alchemist pushes him to face it all. He's captured by enemy soldiers and told to turn into the wind or die. Standing on a dune, sand stinging his eyes, he tries talking to the wind. "You're free, can you help me?" The wind says, "I can blow, but I can't choose." He asks the sun, which says, "I can shine, that's all." Finally, he turns to the desert. "You are the home of life, save me." A miracle happens. The wind picks up, dust blinds the sky, and he seems to melt into it. The soldiers let him go, calling him the prophet of the desert. It's a mystical scene, but at its core, it's about belief. When you give everything, the universe answers back. Ever had a moment like that, when you pour your all into something, and somehow, it just works out? The desert transforms Santiago completely. He goes from a kid who only knows sheep to someone who can read nature and stare down death. He realizes these trials aren't here to break him, they're here to build him. Part 3: The Truth at the Pyramids, the Meaning of Treasure. After all the hardship, Santiago finally reaches the pyramids in Egypt. He stands beneath them, the setting sun stretching his shadow long across the sand. He digs like mad, but finds nothing, and then bandits jump him, beating him half to death. Lying there, nose bleeding, he's crushed with despair. One of the robbers mocks him, saying he once dreamed of treasure under a church in Spain but wasn't dumb enough to chase it. Santiago freezes. It hits him. The real treasure isn't here. It's back where he started, under that sycamore tree by the ruined church. He heads back to Spain and digs up a chest full of gold coins. Sitting under the tree, staring at the glinting treasure, he smiles. But the story doesn't end there. He doesn't settle down with his riches. He takes the gold and sets off to find Fatima, the girl who stole his heart at the desert oasis. He first saw her fetching water by the well, her smile bright as a desert bloom. He'd asked her, "Will you wait for me?" She'd said, "The wind will bring you back." Now, he's keeping his promise. This shows us treasure isn't just stuff, it's about fulfillment and connection. The ending's got a twist to it. Why'd fate send him on this wild goose chase? The answer's in the journey itself. Santiago grows from a clueless kid into someone who understands love and the world. He learns to hear his heart, face his fears, and live in tune with nature. If he dug up the gold right away, he'd never have become who he is now. The treasure's the prize, but the trip's the real reward. It reminds me of a friend's story. She saved up for 2 years after college to study abroad in Europe, dreaming of a big future. But once she got there, she realized she didn't fit and missed her small hometown. She came back, opened a coffee shop, and now she's happy as can be. "That trip didn't give me a degree," she says, "but it gave me myself." Isn't that Santiago all over? Another coworker tried starting a shop that tanked in 6 months. But he learned how to handle money from it, switched gears, and now runs a successful online store. "That flop was my desert," he says. "It forced me to grow." The truth at the pyramids reveals something deeper. Treasure's often closer than we think, but it takes a journey to see it. We're always chasing happiness out there, when it might be waiting on the street you pass every day if you just stop and look. Symbols and wisdom, the hidden gems in the book. The Alchemist hooks you with its story, but it keeps you with its depth like a well full of insights worth savoring. Let's pull out a few big ones and see how they light up our lives. First up is the signs from the universe. The book keeps pointing to dreams, the sound of the wind, the flight of birds, all as the universe talking to us. When Santiago first dreams of the pyramids, he shrugs it off as just a dream until the gypsy calls it a sign. It's Coelho's way of praising intuition. We're so caught up in logic and numbers these days, we forget gut feelings matter too. Ever had a hunch that this is the way, and it turned out right? A friend of mine felt weirdly sure she should dress up for an interview, even though it was casual, and the boss loved her professionalism. Signs remind us, don't tune out that inner voice, it might be fate whispering. Next is the heart of the world. The Alchemist says the world's got a soul, and when you tap into it, everything starts working for you. Santiago senses the attack in the desert because he hears the wind's warning. It's a bit like the Eastern idea of harmony with nature or the Western mystic vibe of everything being connected. Think of it as faith. When you're all in on something, doors open, coincidences, help, you name it. A coworker of mine quit her job to become an illustrator, and right after, free classes and client intros fell into her lap. "I don't know how," she says, "it just felt like it all lined up. One time, I lost my wallet at the airport, freaking out, and a random guy handed it back to me. He'd found it. In that moment, I swear the world had my back." Then there's Urim and Thummim, those 2 stones. They stand for the power of choice. Whenever Santiago's lost, he pulls them out to ask yes or no. Like when he's got enough cash from the crystal shop and isn't sure whether to keep going, he touches the stones and decides to push on. But here's the kicker, he ends up trusting himself, not the stones. "Those rocks just calmed me down," he says later. "I already knew the answer." It's a nudge that outside tools can help, but the real call comes from within. Ever flip a coin to decide something, only to realize you already knew what you wanted? A buddy picking a college major tossed a coin and saw he'd been set on design all along. Last is alchemy itself. It's not just about making gold, it's a metaphor for transforming yourself. The alchemist tells Santiago, true alchemy is turning your soul into gold. Santiago's whole trip is like that. He starts as plain old lead and comes out shining. Isn't that what life's about? Grinding through tough times to come out better? A friend used to waste days gaming until a car wreck landed him in the hospital. He turned it around, learned coding, and now he's an engineer. That crash was my forge, he says. It melted me down and made me new. Real life lessons, how to find your treasure. After Santiago's tale, you're probably wondering, where's my treasure, and how do I chase it? The book doesn't hand you a map, but it lights the way with some key takeaways. Let's unpack them and see how they play out in our lives. First, tune into your signs. Those moments that grab you, a book, a random comment, a wild idea might be your call to action. Don't brush them off, even if they seem out there. Take a small step and see what happens. A friend overheard someone mention pottery, signed up for a class on a whim, and now runs her own studio. If I hadn't tried, she says, I'd never know I love shaping clay. A neighbor retired and randomly decided to paint. Now he's good enough to hold little shows. I found my knack at 60, he laughs. What was I waiting for? Second, embrace the twists and turns. Santiago gets robbed, beaten, nearly killed, but he never quits. Chasing dreams in real life has its dips too. You might lose a job, flop on a project, or get doubted left and right. But that's not the end, it's the sharpening. I know a guy whose first business crashed, leaving him in debt, but he learned from it and his next one hit the top 10 in its field. Falling's fine, he says. Not getting up is the killer. A student I know bombed her grad school entrance exam, cried for days, then nailed it the next year. That year was my desert, she says. I almost gave up, but it made me tougher. Third, trust the universe to pitch in. When you go all out, weirdly cool stuff starts happening. A friend's tip, a lucky break, a stranger's kindness, it can tip the scales. A classmate studying for grad school was burnt out when her neighbor brought over soup and a chat. It kept her going, and she passed. I missed a train once, panicking, until a guy offered me a ride and got me there on time. That's the universe conspiring, right? Not magic, just your hustle making people want to help. Fourth, get what treasure really means. Santiago's gold is nice, but his real win is growth and love. Your treasure might not be cash, it could be family, friends, or peace of mind. A friend ditched a big paycheck to farm back home. People thought he was nuts, but he's grinning ear to ear, hoeing in the sun. Money's enough, he says. I wanted freedom. A coworker climbed the ladder with overtime, only to miss her kid's childhood. She says her real treasure was at home, not the office. Ask yourself, what do I truly want? It might be simpler than you think. Fifth, don't fear the long way around. Santiago treks across half the planet to find the treasure. Was back at square one. Sometimes you've got to wander to figure yourself out. A college pal traveled 20 countries in 3 years, then settled as a teacher back home. I went full circle, he says, and found home's the best. Another friend bounced through 5 jobs before circling back to her first industry, laughing, should have stayed, but I had to roam to know. Your detour might be a try, a fail, or a stretch of confusion, but it'll clarify where you're headed. Closing, set out and find your pyramids. The Alchemist isn't about how to win, it's about waking you up. Through Santiago's steps, it says dreams aren't far-off fantasies, they're embers in your chest. Light them up, and you've got to move, even if the road's long and rough. You might say, I'm too busy for dreams. But look at Santiago, he ditched his flock, crossed a desert, nearly died. What about you? How much are you willing to give for your pyramids? You don't need to trek to Egypt, just start today with something different. Crack a book, pick up a skill, or sit still and hear your heartbeat. A friend of mine, swamped daily, still writes 10 minutes each night after a year. She published a little book. Time's what you make it, she says, and so are dreams. The magic of this book is it convinces you, we've all got a treasure out there, waiting. Your journey might not be as wild as Santiago's, but it's just as real. Don't shy from detours or stumbles, the gold's not at the end, it's in every mile you cover. You might lose your way or doubt yourself, but remember, Santiago did too. He made it to the pyramids, you can too. Now, close your eyes and think, what's your sign? That thought that speeds up your pulse, that image you can't shake. It might be tiny, hazy, but it's there waiting. Don't wait for tomorrow or the perfect moment, fate doesn't deal in ideal timing. Ready? Grab your own Urim and Thummim and go chase down your pyramids. Win or lose, this trip will make you richer inside.